Thank you for singing. Thank you for praying. Now let's open God's Word together in Exodus chapter 16. We're going to kind of laser focus on 3 verses today. Exodus 16, 1 through 3, and see what we can learn. Now, I believe this with all of my heart. None of us are in this room or watching or listening today by accident. I believe that God has something for us to say. And I don't know your story. It may very well be, as we unpack what God brings to light through His Word today, that it hits you with something that you're observing or feeling. And if it does, lean into that, but assured, I don't know your story. I'm not talking about any one person or one situation specifically this morning. We're just responding to what the text has to say for us today. So you just lean in to what the Lord may have for you to learn today. So several years back, I had the opportunity to go to India to work with one of our strategic partners, Hope Givers International. God willing, I'll get a chance to go again. If the Lord wills. On this specific trip, though, as kind of our journey through India, you can't not go to the Taj Mahal when you're in India. I mean, it is one of the wonders of the world. Absolutely breathtakingly beautiful. And the majesty of this whole monument, really, it's the stonework is just amazing. And so one thing that fascinated me, once you get past just the grandeur of it and the beauty of it and the contrast of it, and you begin to kind of pay attention to the details, one of the things that just struck me, as I was leaving, I noticed some stone workers over here to the side. And I walked over, and the guide who was with me, who spoke their language, I began to ask questions like, what are you doing? Because he was just chiseling away at this stone. And the long story short, the ongoing maintenance of this beautiful structure requires that they are constantly forming new stonework. And they're committed that every stone is still fabricated by hand the way that it was done originally. And so this stone worker, as I began to interact with him, he told me the story that he will work on this one piece of stone for 2 solid weeks just to get this one piece ready. And I want you to visualize the contrast. I know you're not there, but way up here into the distance and almost elevated is this beautiful Taj Mahal. And way over here in the corner, off to the side, is this stone worker. And for 2 weeks, he diligently and painstakingly, one piece at a time, refines this stone down here so that it can be put in place up there for a purpose. And that image illustrates our life from time to time. That as the stone worker, if you will, God is refining us. We see imagery throughout the Old Testament, maybe of the refiner fire or the potter and the clay or whatever imagery we want to see. We understand from what we experience and know of God, but also what we observe through the seasons of growth in our life, that we are being chiseled, we are being refined, we are being corrected, we are being prepared to fit in Him exactly as we should. And we long to, we want to fit perfectly where He has us, but what we don't necessarily like is the pain of the chiseling, of the stonework, of the refinement. We long for where we fit there. We don't necessarily enjoy what is here. And if we're being honest, we may reflect on a season of our life that we are navigating presently or in the past, where we have gone through moments, we have gone through seasons of that refinement, of that chiseling. It may have felt like desperation. It may have felt like despair. It may have even felt like defeat. But if our perspective, we can see those moments as God preparing us for how He desires us to fit into His plan and for His glory. It may change our attitude in that moment. So what we're going to see today is in the story of the Exodus, the nation or the people of Israel, they were consumed with doubt, worry, fear, desperation, despair, even moments of defeat. But God uses this to help them grow. Let's see what we can learn from them. Exodus chapter 16, 1 through 3. If you're taking notes either in your own journal or filling in the blanks, the first thing we'll see is this picture of what it is like to load up and move out. Let's read Exodus 16, verse 1. It reads this way. They set out from Elim, and all the congregation of the people of Israel came to the wilderness of Sin, which is between Elim and Sinai, on the 15th day of the second month after they had departed from the land of Egypt. They set out from Elim. Let's get the picture to understand the point. Last week, if you were here, or if not, you could go back and check it out, or just read the preceding chapter on your own later. What we see in the preceding chapter is that the people of Israel came to Marah, and they had bitter water. They were desperate. They were thirsty. They cried out to God. They complained to Moses. Moses prayed to God on their behalf, and through God's command and this miraculous provision, the bitter water was turned sweet. They learned this lesson at Marah, and then God moved them to Elim, which was this oasis, if you would. It was palm trees and springs, just ample provision and shade in the middle of the desert. And it was this season of refreshment, like we can exhale because we have everything that we need now. So they're in Elim, and they break camp from there. They set out. It literally means that it doesn't just mean they departed. The language in Hebrew to set out is like to pull up stakes, to uproot from where you are and to go to the next place. I was reminded of this a few weeks ago. We had the opportunity as a family to go to the beach. It was an amazing time of refreshment. We did absolutely nothing. It was phenomenal. It was just so relaxing, good for the soul, good for the body. And I don't know how you are on a trip. Like about 3/4 of the way through the trip, while we're still trying to enjoy it, we begin to think about going home. Like the discussions like, well, what are we going to do when we get home, or what's on the schedule next week? And there's this tension like, wait a minute, I'm still on vacation, but I'm already starting to feel the pressure of next. And then the day comes, the morning that you have to go home, where you wake up and you pack up and you put everything away and you have to set out. There comes a point where while we would love to just stay right where we are, we've got to pull up stakes and set out from where we are, even this place of refreshment, to go to our ultimate destination. Now, here we know the people of Israel, here they are, they're on this ultimate journey where they had promised to go to the mountain of God, which we will see later at Mount Sinai. Like, God does amazing things there. Their ultimate destination, just like ours, is Mount Zion, heaven. But here it's represented moving from Egypt to Mount Sinai, the mountain of God. And on the way through these growing seasons, as they navigate, there are points of refreshment, pain, provision. What I want us to see here in the nuance of verse 1, here they were at Elim, a place of refreshment. They uproot on their way to Sinai. It's in the wilderness. A lot of times it is the interval, it is the space in between where we grow. It is the season or the moment from refreshment to our ultimate destination that may feel like a vacuum of God's presence. It may feel like a time of loneliness, but it is in the space in between where we are tested, where we are refined, where we are chiseled like that stonework. And it may very well be that in the space in between, in the wilderness, as if it were, where we are exposed. where some things in our heart that we thought we had that together are exposed. Maybe there are some pain points, some trauma, or some sin in our past of habits that resurface. Like, oh, where did that come from? And oftentimes it's in those moments. And I realize for us, like that time of refreshment, I use the example of a vacation, and certainly that could be. Maybe it's a retreat. A lot of times maybe it is, maybe it's a revival service or this beautiful church moment you've experienced in the past, or just this place of this moment in time where in your marriage everything is beautiful, or in your family everything is right, or in your church like everything is just clicking. And there is this pause, or in the moment we're saying, okay, can we just stay right here? I don't want anything to change. I need everything to stay just like it is right now. And I realize that we all have that desire, but let's just be honest. That's not realistic. That's not life. That's not how it works, because inevitably we need to move from where we are to where God causes us to be, and at some point we've got to get up and continue our journey. But here's where I would encourage us to think. I want to plant a seed thought in your mind today, and we're going to come back to it probably in 3 or 4 weeks. Oftentimes our life is like a line, a timeline if you would. We see where we started, we see where we're headed or we would like to go. But let's just be realistic. Our life, it doesn't feel like a straight line, is it? And in fact, we want some things to change. We want to grow, we want to develop, we want to improve, whatever word we may want to use. And we realize if I continue on this path, I may not get where I want to be. I want to grow, and that's going to require a change in trajectory for me. But where we're oftentimes not realistic is we think like we need to see some dramatic altercation or altering of our life. But here's where we can lean into. Those situations, those seasons, those elams in our life can be moments. Moments in the timeline of our life where the trajectory is altered just 1%. Just a little bit. What can I grow? What's one thing I can put in place, learning from this experience that puts me on a path to grow? The language that I would encourage is us to think, oftentimes since we view our life in this timeline, we're naturally programmed to think in hours, seconds, and minutes. That's what time is like. And we just live from one day to the next, one moment to the next, 1 hour to the next, 1 minute to the next. Jesus, in Mark chapter 1:15, he comes onto the scene. He's now come of age. He's 30. He begins his journey. And he says in Mark chapter 1, the time has come. Time in that moment where Jesus is using it, that word in Mark 1:15, is not time as in hours, days, moments, and seconds. That would be the Greek word chronos. There in Mark 1:15, he uses the word kairos, K-A-I-R-O-S, which is it literally is a moment, an interruption. It's a kairos, where we begin to have perspective shift in our world, is while we realize that we are moving through life one day at a time, there are kairos moments in our life where God wants to teach us, grow us, develop us. Sometimes those moments are when the light bulb goes off during a time of refreshment on vacation or revival where God moves through a song. Sometimes those kairos moments are tragedy, painful moments where we learn a lesson, where that tendency of sin is exposed or that attitude is revealed. Don't waste those kairos moments as opportunities to grow and mature and to just alter the trajectory of your life. Because that's where the power of God is often discovered, is in those moments where God chisels away or refines us. Here's what I want us to see. While we don't always like it, God refines our faith as we endure pain. And in fact, if I were to summarize all of today's sermon, that's the way I would describe it. Learning to embrace and even accept those moments or seasons of refinement, while it may feel like pain I have to endure, those are kairos moments for the Lord to teach me about himself and to teach me about me. Because in suffering or in pain is when we grow. It's where we are stretched. Israel would have loved to stay in the springs of Elim, but it was in the in-between of the wilderness where we will see time and time again, God reveals himself to them and exposes in them things that need to change. It's where we are stretched. It would be, if we never pulled up stakes and went out, it would be almost as if we walk into a fitness center or a gym and all the equipment was there, but there were no weights. That would defeat the purpose, right? Because it's the adding of the weight that applies the stretch or the stress to push us on toward growth. So while it may not be joyful, we need those moments. And in fact, James even tells us in James chapter 1 that we need to look at those moments with joy. Consider it pure joy, my brothers, James writes, James chapter 1, verses 1 through 6. Consider it pure joy, brothers, that you face these trials with joy. Why? Because we know that they develop in us maturity and perseverance. So oftentimes my perspective toward the pain can change the way I see it. I can see it as a kairos. And in fact, when we look at examples throughout the Old Testament, Jacob, he had a moment where he wrestled with God in the night. It's where his name was changed to Israel. That was a moment for him. It was painful, but that was a moment where God established the trajectory of his life on a different path. Paul, where he was persecuting believers, he's on the road to Damascus, and there's a moment on his journey where he has an encounter with God. Christ reveals himself, the light of Christ, he's blinded, and that becomes a moment for him. Lazarus was dead, and his family was desperate, and Jesus showed up, and things changed. Our perspective on suffering must be clearly aligned with the power of the gospel, because it is through the hope of Christ that life comes out of death. And it is naive for us, and unfortunately there are some people that claim to follow Christ that teach a false gospel that says, hey, if you're following Jesus, you're never going to experience pain. That is A, unbiblical, B, it's unhealthy, because if I expect endless comfort, that's not the aim of my life. I need to see these seasons, these moments, as opportunities to become more like Christ, and even more importantly, through the power of the gospel, to seek to give glory to God even in our pain, even in our suffering. When we go without, or when our world seems to be crumbling on top of us, those are moments and opportunities for us to give God glory. Those are moments and opportunities for us as his children to participate in the activity of redemption. Those are opportunities for us as the people of God to participate in relationships of reconciliation or restoration, because we are the ones with the answer that the world around us is so desperate to hear. Think that through for just a minute. And whether we are in need or in plenty, there's no shame in either one. We either give God glory that we have all the resources to meet our needs, or we give God the glory for the desperate time where we need him to show up and provide. We give him glory in either extreme, whether in want or in need. Why? Because in those moments, we as God's children can see and point others to the faithfulness of God to meet our needs, and even to put aside any attitude of entitlement, because we don't deserve any of it. All that we have is through his faithfulness and for his glory. So this is an opportunity for us to view moments in our life a little differently, with an attitude or perspective of gratitude, even in our suffering. We can't stay always in the place of refreshment. We got to load up and move out. But even when we do, this is where we have to be careful, because we'll see next in the 2 following verses that the people of Israel have this pattern of memory loss. Memory loss. Let's read verses 2 and 3 of Exodus 16. It reads this way. And the whole congregation of the people of Israel grumbled against Moses and Aaron in the wilderness, and the people of Israel said to them, would that we had died by the hand of the Lord in the land of Egypt, when we sat by the meat pots and ate bread to the full. For you have brought us out into the wilderness to kill this whole assembly with hunger. Now here they are, here they go again, if you would. It has been 1 month since they began their Exodus journey at this time. And they are acting like a people that have never witnessed God do anything supernatural. They are talking as if this is the first time they've ever encountered anything. Like, how do we just need to rewind and replay the things that you have seen just in the past 30 days? Where God defeated their entire army, where God brought the waters and split them in half, where God gave you water that was bitter and now sweet, and you continue to doubt what he can do. They act like this is the first time. But before we throw stones, you and I do the same thing. We will reach a moment in our life where we're in desperate need. We don't know how this problem is going to resolve, whether it's a relationship that's broken, or we're at the end of the month and there's more month than there is money, or whatever the situation may be, and we panic and we act like it's the first time. And how quickly we forget. We have memory loss. So how many days have I woken up in my life and the sun still shines and I have food for how many times do I need to see the Lord work? Granted, unless some of you have had a life experience you've never shared, I don't know that any of us in this room have ever stood before a body of water and seen it split in half and we walk on dry land. I don't know that any of us in this room have ever seen like a cloud or a fire just follow us and lead the way and we can just go there. Like, we have not physically experienced the miraculous power of God just like the Israelites. But we have experienced the miraculous power of God every day through the beauty of his written word, through the provision that he has given us, through the presence of his church here on this earth. Like, we have seen him. We have seen him provide physically for us. We have seen him change lives through baptism like we celebrated last week, or you'll watch a video of today. We have seen milestones in our individual lives where whether we needed a job and we found one, or we didn't think we would pass a class and we graduated, or whatever it may be in your life, you have experienced these moments where God has led you through a season of growth and endurance. But we reach the next problem and we have memory loss. It's like we've never been here before. And God is urging us, I need you to remember my faithfulness. I'm the same God, and I would be the first to confess that I have short-term memory loss often, where the enemy gets in my head, he injects lies that feed insecurity in me, and he causes me to doubt his goodness in the present because I have forgotten his faithfulness in the past. And so many times, this is the way the enemy loves to work. He loves to attack us with those thoughts of insecurities and doubt right on the heels of great success and celebration. Because he hates to see us be joyful. Just like he did here. Like the people of Israel just left Elim. And immediately they begin to forget. He just gave them springs of water and trees of shade. And they forget. And watch what happens. Each time those calamities come, they respond just like we respond. They forget all the past, they distrust God's mercy, and they complain. They went to the extreme to say, let's just go back to Egypt. At least there we had plenty of food to eat. Let's go back into slavery? Really? Is that what you want to do? The extreme reaction to their situation made no common sense. And oftentimes we do the same. Here's what I want us to see. Most times their murmur, their complaint started with grumbling. Grumbling oftentimes is like a negative remark that is in one person's head, or they may say under their breath. We murmur, we grumble in our own spirit, and when we begin to articulate that, maybe just to one person, it spreads like a cancer. Because that negativity breeds negativity and gossip. Oh, let me tell you what I heard. Let me tell you what so-and-so said. Let me tell you what I saw the other day. And all of a sudden, this grumbling develops murmuring, spreads like wildfire through our family, through our neighborhood, through our church, through our community, whatever the context of a relationship may be. And all of a sudden, we allow ourselves, this is the guardedness that we have to be careful of. This is what happens here. Because I promise you, they didn't have like a mass notification system with all the millions of people in Israel. This grumbling became up with a few, and all of a sudden, it just spread throughout the entire people. One person tells another person who tells another person, and all of a sudden millions of people are up in arms, grumbling, all saying the same thing, all doubting the faithfulness of God. We are much the same way when we allow ourselves to get caught up in the current of gossip and complaining. We are swept then into the current of negativity, which then means that we are blinded from the truth because we've only taken one piece of information and fabricated the whole rest of the story because we know what's best. And then inevitably what happens, we start to say things that we can never take back, that we inevitably regret and likely truly don't mean. Why do we do this? Well, Scott Sauls wrote a book called Beautiful People Don't Just Happen. And in his book, he recommended 3 reasons why people often do this. 1, regret. Perhaps there's guilt or shame over something I did or something that I didn't do or something I am because of what I did. Regret sometimes can be the motive to either start or share these lies. Or another reason is hurt. Maybe I've been traumatized and I've been hurt, therefore I need to lash out on someone else because hurting people hurt people. The other reason that he shares is fear. Maybe I'm so fearful of what could happen, or I'm so fearful of the unknown, I feel like I need to interject myself into the situation. Maybe I can influence the outcome because it's fear. And I think we could compare the Israelites' reaction to our own hostile reaction to what we see happening in our society today. Like, people immediately, when we see anything that we don't like or anything that concerns us, we jump to these crazy extremes and we just attack people one after the other. I wouldn't say encouraged, challenged would be the better word, by a podcast I listened to this past week. Carey Nieuwhof was the host, and he interviewed John Eldredge, who was a well-known author and psychologist who wrote the books Wild at Heart and many others like them. And John Eldredge kind of played the cultural psychologist to say, if we actually watch what's going on around us in the world and the way people are behaving and even the things that we are experiencing, we as a society, each one of us shows symptoms of trauma. Maybe it's seen in little ways by we're not sleeping as well as we used to, or we walk into a room and forget why we were there, or our overreaction to things. We are all showing signs of trauma. And we're seeing the ripple effects of that even in our society. And this is the natural tendency of humanity. When I am hurt, I want to gravitate toward people that say what I want to hear. And what that creates is a reverberating echo chamber. All of a sudden, we're surrounded by people that have the same negativity that we have. This is why, we have, let me just use cultural language. This is why we have people that only listen to CNN and people that only listen to Fox News, right? That's an example. Like, I just want to surround myself with people that are going to talk and say the things I want to hear in any situation, rather than actually listening and learning and using some common sense and good judgment. And the echo chamber, or the extreme that we go into, let me just say it this way: despite what you may hear on the news or social media, that person is not the voice of everybody, regardless of what we may think or feel. And when we give way to the cancer of grumbling and murmuring, it's contagious, and by default, it distorts and it exaggerates the truth. Specifically, it distorts the past because I don't have all the story, and it exaggerates the present because it makes it feel like it's even a much bigger problem than it actually is. When in the middle of all of that, we have a God who is faithful, who is reliable, who is present, who is trustworthy. C.S. Lewis wrote, "Hell begins with a grumbling mood, always complaining, always blaming others. But you are still distinct from it. You may even criticize it in yourself and wish you can stop it, but there may come a day when you can no longer." While I want us to see the contrast, while grumbling or murmuring or complaining is contagious, so is faith, hope, and love. It is also contagious. And we have, as the people of God, like the inoculation to heal all of that distrust by our position to show the love of Christ in the way that we express the truth of the gospel to others. Because whether it be murmuring, whether it be gossip, or even worry, it is the fruit of forgetfulness. Think through that just for a minute. And how or why is that true? If worry or complaining is the fruit of forgetfulness, we see that because I begin to panic at my certain situation, and I have forgotten the power of God or the presence of God or what God has done in the past. And the hope of the gospel is what the people of God are mandated to share. And we will never escape pain. We will never escape hostility because we live in a fallen world. Read Genesis chapter 3. I'm not making that up. So all throughout history, we have had tragedy and crisis and epidemics and pandemics and leaders like Nebuchadnezzar and Pharaoh, and stories like Egypt or Nero and Rome and Hitler and Germany and Putin and Ukraine. I mean, the story goes on and on. We will never be escape from tyrants and sin. But worry is the fruit of forgetfulness. We look ahead for a better country. We watch God work in the midst of hostility, in the midst of pain, and in the midst of suffering. We learned last week, what was Moses' initial reaction? Let me just pray to God because he is faithful and he can deliver. We can look at the example of Job, where Job relied on the faithfulness of God, and he even remained faithful when his friends that he loved and loved him gave him a reason why to reject God. No, I will be faithful. Or even in modern stories of history, you read the account of Corrie ten Boom, who walked by faith and encouraged and trusted God to deliver her even in the most extreme suffering that we could ever imagine. The beginning of anxiety, fear, and worry is the end of faith. And the beginning of faith is the end of anxiety, complaining, and worry. They flip on one another. Let me move on. I gotta, in the interest of time. Let me end by, okay, so what, you might say? Like, what does all this mean? I want to give you 6 principles, statements, whatever they may be. You might want to write these down and see if one of these might be a place where you could turn this conversation even into a moment for you to live out a different truth. So here's the first one. Remember his deeds by writing them down. Journaling is one of those spiritual disciplines that we often, we talk about read your Bible, pray every day, right? But journaling is a spiritual discipline that's beautiful. It's a way to articulate prayers, but also it is a way to write down the goodness and faithfulness and the deeds of the Lord, so that when we know there may be a day that comes where we forget, we can refer back and say, now I am reminded. I wrote this down where he answered this prayer, he met this need, he intervened in this powerful way. So that is one thing that we could do to make, if we know that worry is the fruit of forgetfulness, how do we help ourselves not forget? Write it down. Here's the second thing. Reject lies from the enemy when we know that he works to deceive. There's nothing that creates more joy for the enemy than to isolate you and to interweave complaining and griping and disunity in a faith family, whether that's a local church or any community that you work with. So let's just be aware that he's going to feed us lies. We never know the whole story. So let's reject those lies from the enemy, and let's realize that you and I are not the enemy. He would love to convince us that we are, but we're not. Here's the third thing. Resist the temptation to engage in gossip and isolating our input influences. Here, let me explain what I mean by that. Resist the temptation to engage in gossip. Like we've loved this since we were kids, to feel like I've got something that you don't know and I want to tell you. Like there is this natural joy that comes by being able to be the one to deliver news, right? Resist the temptation to engage in gossip, and resist the temptation to isolate the voices that are influencing us. Okay? I will use myself as an example. Brian, can I do that? Okay? I would be the first one to say, let's just use news as an example. I am probably the majority of the time I consume conservative news outlets. Okay? But there are times where I am intentional and deliberate to turn the dial, because I want to hear the other viewpoint. That is beneficial and healthy to hear, because there's always more to the story, or there's always a different point of view. And it may or may not change what you prioritize or value, but it could be added information or another perspective to say, oh, wait a minute. And the reverse could be true. Maybe you primarily consume left-leaning news. Okay, well, occasionally, flip it over to the dial and see maybe there's another perspective. And we create our own echo chambers where we're constantly hearing the same voice, getting the same input, and that's not wise. Okay, so one way that we could resist the urge to often share gossip is by putting ourselves maybe outside of our comfort zone to hear another perspective. Fourth, rely on Matthew 18. For example, I don't know if you realize this, we have a guidebook in God's holy word that literally gives us oftentimes step-by-step instructions on what to do in any given situations. And one of them, like if you've experienced an offense with another person, rather than going and telling that to social media or telling that to the world, look at Matthew 18 and the step-by-steps and go talk to them face-to-face, eye-to-eye. Hey, is this true? Let's talk about it. Actually trust the process that God has provided for us to allow for reconciliation in relationships. Rely on Matthew 18. Number 4, raise the flag of redemption as we carry hope to the world. We have a natural tendency when someone disagrees with us or someone offends us to write them off forever. Don't write people off. Paul said he has given unto us the ministry of reconciliation. We, as we carry hope to the world, we've got the good news of the gospel that will flip the world on its head And so we must be committed to raise the flag of redemption. There is no relationship, there is no person too far gone that they are outside of God's reach. You are never outside of God's reach, and neither are they. So raise the flag of redemption as we carry hope to the world. And then lastly, recognize the mercy and the patience of God. There was a children's song we sang growing up. I've not heard it in years, but it simply went like this. I'm not going to sing it. The words were, "He's still working on me to make me what I ought to be. It took him just 1 week to make the moon and the stars, the sun and the earth, and Jupiter and Mars. How lovely and patient he must be. He is still working on me." Let me go back to where I started, and then I'll be done. There's a stone worker chipping away so that this stone can fit where it's designed to go. And as you navigate through life, there are moments and experiences where God demonstrates, I'm still working on you. And while it is painful, it is also hopeful. It's a reminder that He loves me too much to let me stay where I am. And when I experience His refinement, even though it means suffering, those are moments where I'm reminded of the presence and the faithfulness of God in my life. And I'm thankful that He is patient. I'm thankful that He is loving. I'm thankful that He refines me because He knows He has a plan that I may not see. So don't waste any moment. It may be a moment in a song. It may be a moment throughout this week in a conversation that you have with someone that you work with or someone that you live with. Those are moments where you can grow. You can be refined. Those are moments where you can be shaped, and those are moments where you can demonstrate the hope of the gospel. And if you have those moments and experiences, I would love to hear about them. Because those are moments to celebrate. Those are moments to pray for one another and to encourage one another. So how do we live this out? Let me talk about a few next steps. It may be that one of these 6 points illustrates the next step for you, or it may be that one of these final 3 could be the moment for you. Perhaps there's a moment in someone in this room or online where today you realize that you need Jesus. That there's never been a time in your life where you have turned to Him by faith and trusted Him with your life and realized that He sent His Son to die for you. And that would be the most beautiful refinement of a stone in your heart. And so today may be the day that you recognize the mercy of God and you turn to Jesus as your King for the very first time. And right where you are, a simple conversation to confess your need for Him and trust Him with your life can take place. That may be something that you have questions about. You can let that be known on the next step, and we would love to come alongside and help you walk through that. Perhaps you're here today, and something that has been said realizes that there's a need for you to repent. I've engaged in gossip, I've engaged in complaining, and I can see the impact that that's having on the relationships around me, and I need to repent of that. Repent means stop it and do something different. All right? That may mean the different is I need to exercise in Matthew 18 and just simply go and talk to somebody face to face and hear the rest of the story. That may mean I just need to keep my mouth shut, trust the Lord, and move on. Lastly, perhaps there's an opportunity for you to build in a deeper spiritual discipline, to commit to journal the work of the Lord in you by writing things down of His faithfulness to strengthen your faith in the future. Because I know there may be times of doubt or a tendency to complain. I want to be reminded of His goodness by writing those things down now and as I move forward.